Hello, thank you, Lenny, for that fantastic introduction again. And I'm really pleased to be here with you today. During this time, I plan to provide my predictions of the future of mobile research. And I think as president and co-founder of a company that helped pioneer mobile research solutions like camera phone ethnographies and mobile diaries, starting back in 2003, it's no secret that I've long been a devout believer that mobile communications would one day transform our industry, and so you can probably all guess which way my predictions are going to go. Within this time slot, I'm going to provide you my top 10 list of how I believe mobile technology will reshape our industry, understanding that it will also be transformed by social media and many underlying technology advancements. But before we get to the top 10 list, our overarching prediction is that our industry will be dominated by mobile respondents 5 years from now, accounting for the majority of both quantitative and qualitative traffic in our industry. So keep in mind that when I talk about mobile devices, I'm including things like tablet, PCs, iPads in much of our discussion, because the functionality that's needed to support these devices, like scalable images and touch screen support, is really very similar to mobile. So by 2016, which is our 5-year planning horizon, mobile devices will have long surpassed PCs as the most commonly used device for accessing the web. This is projected to happen as early as next year or 2013 by most accounts, and there will be 788 million mobile-only Internet users by 2015. The mobile-only Internet population will grow 56-fold from 14 million at the end of 2010 to 788 million by the end of 2015. Feature phones, which are those older devices that we differentiate from the ones most of us use to browse the web, still provide nearly a quarter of our mobile traffic, and we think by the end of this planning horizon, they'll be mostly obsolete throughout North America and Europe. So if you're one of those people hanging on who thinks that mobile devices will not radically reshape our industry, I say think again. Let's also consider another aspect of modern communications, which is social media. Social media usage is leveling off now. We don't really want to label it a mature industry just yet, but after years of explosive growth, Facebook's unique visitor count is now holding steady, and Twitter's unique visitor count has remained constant since early 2010. But the percentage of mobile traffic accounted for by these social media is still very rapidly growing. It's relatively stable with Twitter. It's still rapidly growing with Facebook. So to me, that indicates that it's the combination of the two technologies where the most compelling and radical transformation of our communications is growing, not just in our industry, but also outside of it. So here we go, 10 predictions in no particular order of importance. Prediction number 1 is that apps will be a mostly transitional phenomena in our industry. With the advent of HTML5, mobile browsers will be increasingly powerful and will replace the need for the majority of apps. And because the browser-based approach has the ability to support all devices, I think any market research company that spends money developing specific apps for solutions that can be supported by a browser will be at a financial disadvantage unless that app happens to offer some functionality that the browser just can't support. It's not going to make sense. It may take the full 5 years for HTML5 to roll out its full feature set with wide adoption, but the benefits of lower battery consumption and lower development costs while still providing geolocation, animation, and other next-gen functionality will ultimately weigh out. and much of HTML5 is already here today. And also, app downloads seem to be reaching a peak. A study by Localytics last year found that 1 in 4 smartphone apps is downloaded but never used again, which is a function of both the novelty wearing off and the more powerful browsing capabilities on mobile devices themselves. So I think most people will not want to have apps on their phones that don't have meaning in their lives. And this means that the typical user will limit their app usage, although not necessarily the download and trial experience, but the actual usage of the apps to those that they intend to use every day and that add convenience to their everyday lives. They might download an app for a specific project or to join a panel, but the continuous use is going to require continuous development on the part of the NewMR to maintain the engagement factor, and there's no assurance that the respondents will download updates. And the app does not help in respondent authentication because the carrier does not authenticate. So more on this topic in a subsequent slide. My second prediction is that mobile technology will hasten the adoption of online methodologies in developing nations and regions. Right now, more than half the population in developing nations had cell phone access at the end of 2010, according to the UN and the ITU. Most of these people do not have access to the internet, and their mobile phone has the greatest potential to get them there. The mobile phone has been credited with improving the economies of rural areas and remote regions by introducing e-commerce and lending, but it also provides strong cost-benefit ratios through improved access to medical and farming information, education, crowd voicing, and citizens media. So there's lots of reasons that these regions want to come online. Here's an interesting tidbit, compliments of Cisco. By 2015, 4 major regions, Sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, South Asia, and the Middle East, and 40 countries will have more people with mobile network access than with access to electricity at home. Already there are more mobile subscribers in developing nations than in developed ones, 3 billion as compared to 2.3 billion in developed nations, providing tremendous value to move market research online and tremendous value to our industry if that happens. And in the meantime, while mobile browser penetration catches up in these regions, offline apps and text messaging are going to help fill in the gap. My third prediction is that geolocation will become the most important new type of metadata. Geolocation is a set of technologies with great promise for market research and maybe the most important new piece of metadata that we will witness in this decade because there's so much we can do with it. To authenticate that respondents purchased where they said they did, to understand true shopping patterns, to invite people at a particular point in time and place. However, the limitations are many in that the technology is still very immature. It's a tremendous battery drain. Mobile users have the ability to turn off this feature. And, mostly that its usage requires separate opt-in processes and legal compliance with still much evolving and ever more stringent regional privacy laws that are only going to get worse as time goes on. But still, with the pace at which geolocation technology is advancing, it is very likely that it will be a highly valued research tool 5 years from now. Prediction number 4 is that both traditional and new methodologies will exist side by side 5 years from now. So we don't see the conjoint going away, but we do believe that traditional methodologies will be more expensive to support than the newer methodologies. Well, it's true that we can no longer dictate the devices that respondents use to participate in research projects. In some instances, like the conjoint, we'll need to recommend that they use a larger screen and potentially detect for the type of device used. This doesn't mean necessarily that those larger screens must be desktops or laptops. The immense success of the iPad and other tablets means that some kind of mobile device could be suitable for virtually all survey projects, even if mobile phones are not. regardless of whether they're allowed or not allowed, I think the more we place limitations on respondents, the more we're going to have to consider special incentives in exchange. And as surveys become shorter to accommodate mobile methodologies, incentive expectations will increase around the collection of lengthier data sets. The stage is already set for this since most panels vary incentive based upon survey length today. So new methodologies are utilizing larger sampling frames but collecting smaller data snippets from each respondent and reducing the question set for specific devices in multi-mode surveys based upon conditional logic for those particular devices, and extending and utilizing as much data mining and pre-population as possible. I think a lot of the more innovative technologies are going to include more intercept at the point of purchase and consumption with triggers around specific barcodes and locations. Prediction number 5 is that email will still be the dominant form of survey invitation, although we think we'll be studying the heck out of invitation mode bias and device bias. Mobile devices have provided us the ability to stay connected 24/7, and we continue to use them to check our email, but increasingly we're using them to check Facebook, TripIt, or other sites where we can obtain multiple forms of communication currently. We're increasingly joining panels and responding to invitations through social media because it accomplishes multiple communications objectives at the same time. The invitation options with mobile technologies continue to expand. These aid not only in invitation delivery and reminders, but in the panel recruitment process itself where that process is engaged. And so in addition to email, there are forms like SMS or text messaging, in-app messaging, which is an extremely inobtrusive way to communicate, short codes, QR codes, other options for in-store and in-transit, and similar situations where previously a face-to-face interview might have been conducted. We're starting to see some location-based triggers as well. But even with this wide array, our prediction is that email will remain the dominant delivery vehicle for our industry because it is inexpensive and intended for a specific recipient and can and when needed take into account known sampling attributes. But I'm not sure it's going to win out by much, and we may actually have difficulty ascertaining whether it has won at all. Prediction number 6 is that mobile technology will drive down data collection costs. I cite that as evidence because at Kinesis we've always discounted mobile surveys over web surveys in cost, primarily because they're shorter and simpler to implement and just require fewer resources, whether it's CPU or programming time. There's going to be exceptions, such as when geo-tracking is required, which is something that could very well increase costs. Currently, on the panel or sample side, costs are actually higher for mobile respondents, and I think there's a good reason for that. There are always startup costs associated with introducing new technologies, and we ourselves are advocates of the mixed mode approach, so where possible and where research methodologies permit, providing the flexibility to support participants who can decide to complete surveys whenever they choose on whatever device they're using at the time. And we think this is crucial when you consider that the traditional online respondent pool is insufficient to meet industry needs today and will be even more so 5 years from now. I also think this goes to the heart of the engagement process that we've been talking about in this particular conference setting. And meanwhile, there's a vast supply of respondents who've been left relatively untapped. These are the mobile-centric web users, meaning people who use their mobile phones as their primary web browsing device and do not or very rarely use a computer to access the web. Many of these fall into the highly desired millennial generation. So mobile devices are not only an optimum medium to engage the majority of them, they are, with some people, the only way to reach them. So if we allow research participants greater options, in theory, panel churn should be reduced. And I think through time, the current issue of higher sampling costs for mobile respondents, which I associate with supporting new and multiple technologies, when demand has not yet sufficiently ramped up to support them, will diminish through time. Prediction number 7 is that respondent authentication and engagement measures will change significantly to incorporate mobile technology. Respondent authentication and engagement today are measured by a variety of techniques that will need to be reconsidered in the future. Web and mobile respondents will presumably have different completion time metrics. Respondents will need to be allowed to come in under multiple IP addresses, since using a mobile device you can drop off on one device, potentially resume on another device, but also because mobile IPs can change each time a subscriber connects or reconnects to a network. So a panelist in this scenario could enter a survey under one IP address, save, and resume their session under a totally different IP address. And also with IP pooling, unique IPs for us on mobile devices are history. And digital fingerprinting is highly dependent on flash, which is not broadly supported across mobile devices. Engagement itself will need to be measured differently based upon device as well, since straightlining, one metric that's been talked about here today, may not be relevant for many mobile surveys. Willingness to share might be a factor that would be considered a part of the engagement measure in the future. So for instance, respondents who provide greater access to social media data or are more willing to share their location details or be tracked might be said to be more engaged in the research process. So we may have some new measures and need to find a way to replace some of the old measures too. Prediction number 8 is that routers will incorporate mobile traffic, and advanced behavioral sampling frameworks will model for mobile devices aside traditional online behavior. So as surveys evolve to incorporate multi-mode web and mobile traffic, we believe that routers will continue to play an important role. Routers could play a larger role potentially detecting which surveys are mobile-enabled or willing to accept mobile respondents, meaning they're program ready for them. Since mobile respondents will be offering up a reduced data set, there is also ideally the desire for the router to perhaps provide some pre-population of data in a behind-the-scenes fashion so that the time would not need to be taken in the survey. These types of, some advanced routers may be able to fill this function. Mobile-centric respondents are likely to have different behavioral profiles. So as an example, for many, their shopping behavior has moved to the mobile device already. And that may change the sampling frameworks too. The priority router may be able to determine whether mobile respondents wait in line behind online respondents or are prioritized over other types of respondents. Will the type of device become a factor in the place in the queue? I don't know if anyone's really begun addressing these issues, but I think that they are factors that we'll start thinking about very soon. In recruitment mechanisms, whether via the traditional impaneled model or an opt-in specific to a particular study, if it cannot incorporate new respondent sources without increasing the percentage of mobile respondents as a natural outcome, viewing mobile respondents as somehow unique and separate from other types of respondents may work for some methodologies, some specific methodologies, but not in general. And routers could be one of the mechanisms that is used to control for this factor, especially in higher volume survey deployment settings. But regardless, I still think that they're going to be here with us 5 years from now and will continue to play an important role in minimizing recruitment source bias. Prediction number 9 is that in-store couponing will be married with surveys as marketing and data collection lines blur. What better way to understand the buyer at the moment of truth than to collect data as you're just handing out coupons? Collectively, retailers are expected to spend $200 million on mobile marketing in this year, which is a 535% increase over last year. So mobile devices are becoming a highly interactive shopping tool. And while mobile couponing is in the early stages, it's already showing a 15 to 20% redemption rate improvement over traditional methods with easy online tracking. So mobile coupons can be delivered or actively obtained through both in-store and out-of-store mechanisms. And early statistics are showing that 30% of mobile coupon users are people who've never clipped a paper coupon. So it's providing retailers the ability to create more information about these in-the-moment couponing people. Coupons are going to serve, I think, not just as inducements to buy, but also to learn more about shoppers in exchange. And couponing as a form of incentives is already popular in enterprise surveys and enterprise panels for retail clients. So the delivery of a mobile and dual mode coupon is probably just around the corner. And the final prediction is that finally the CPG industry will be able to track impulse purchases with precision. Kinesis engaged with a study with Start Sampling earlier this year, and it consisted of a random selection of primary U.S. household purchasers across age and other demographic groups. We didn't have any set quotas, but the respondents were terminated if they did not own or use some type of mobile device in addition to their regular computer. And we found that they're routinely using their mobile devices to research products, get input from social media, locate retailers, and conduct purchases. So nearly a quarter of the smartphone users had used their phone to research products within the previous week, and approximately 15% had actually purchased a product from their mobile device in the same time frame. So now consider the predicted growth of m-commerce, which is predicted by Yankee Group to be at around $241 billion this year, growing to more than $1 trillion by 2015. So last year, online transactions from mobile devices were widely touted as the highest growth purchasing channel during the holiday season. 5 years from now, we should expect that mobile devices will be a prominent, if not dominant, shopping tool for a large segment of consumers. And while they're doing this, there's immense potential for our industry to capture research data from them as they browse products, compare prices and reviews, and conduct mobile purchases. I think tracking this behavior as it is conducted is one of the reasons I originally got into the industry. It's going to add phenomenal insights to our industry, and I think especially for those hard-to-track impulse purchases that many of us don't remember making or perhaps don't want to remember making. So to wrap up, I think 5 years from now, by 2016, the term smartphone may well have disappeared from our vocabulary, and the language around mobile devices could well be quite different as well. We've talked a lot about language in these sessions, and I'm trying to change my language and not use the word smartphone. I'm kind of tired of it, and I think it may not be there in 5 years. So that's Ed, I'm open to questions.